Loud and Clear, the podcast by SADA for innovative business leaders and technology enthusiasts, where we explore how Google Cloud is transforming the industry and what that means to you. Now, here's your host, Tony Safoian.
Very excited today. Have my special guest with me.
Woo.
Our still relatively new, I can still say new.
Oh yeah, shiny new.
Chief Technology Officer, Miles Ward, in the building.
He is I and I am him.
Welcome.
Not very slim, but that's okay.
Hey, major progress.
That's true.
So we got so much to talk about. Really passionate about all the stuff you're working on.
I appreciate that.
But something that has influenced me immediately, and by the way, I've made it like required reading for the whole team. I don't know if you saw that. We're buying books for everybody. There's this book called The Phoenix Project.
Oh, classic.
By?
My man, Gene Kim.
Gene Kim.
He had some quality collaborators too. They worked together on building this, a way of converting the struggle that I see every company out there working their way through into a story that all of us can relate to, right? It's approachable and digestible. It has all of the right challenges that the companies really have, but doesn't make you feel like you're wading through some textbook.
Yes, it's fiction.
Mm-hmm.
So, they can make it interesting. That makes you want to keep reading it like it's not a school book, but I've never seen like the typical struggles of every traditional enterprise articulated from our angle, sort of the IT business angle.
Mm-hmm.
But it was so like eye-opening for me to see it from that perspective. And then as I was reading it, I was like, oh my God, every client we have is going through this right now.
Yeah, I was super geeked to turn you on to it because it's so obvious to me how applicable it is to what we do. And, it's like one of those things where you've got a great song you want your buddy to hear, and you're like, have you heard this song? And he goes, no. You're like, yes! Oh, you're going to love this song so much. So I knew that being able to get that set of ideas in front of you would be something you'd dig.
I love how it opens. He's like, the CEO calls him in, the main character, and he's like, so I just fired the CIO and the number 2 guy, so you're in charge.
You're it.
And he tries to get out of it. But
maybe I could, yeah, nope.
And then the things he uncovers from his new vantage point relative to just sort of, managing one part of technology. A couple of things that stood out, like from the business standpoint, this clear line of business-led initiative called the Phoenix Project. Mm-hmm. Which was so critical for their ability to compete, in the marketplace. It's this fictional company,
mm-hmm.
Auto parts, right? It could be anything, but so, they're being out-competed, out-innovated in the marketplace. They've been working on this thing for 2 years. They can't quite get it out. And I'm like, oh my God, every company has these initiatives, more than one. And the angle by which it makes it so clear how technology and dev teams and ops and marketing, etc. They're either enablers or they're a hindrance to major line of business initiatives.
Mm-hmm.
Every day.
Well, the thing that the book captured for me, the real crystalline difference was the contrast between the chaos and terror and mayhem in this IT department, and how many things were out of their control, how many things were beyond their ability to manage, and then the calm, experienced, patient manufacturing floor operator owner guy, right? Who's just cool as a cucumber. All of this is something that's under control. We've been doing this for a long time. And you go into businesses that are working on technology, and you'll meet, their IT folks and their, people that are working in operations. You go, how long have you been at this? Oh, 20 years, 15 years, 17 years, 30 years. Is it under control? No, it's terror, it's madness, it's mayhem, right? And so, I think there's just this huge hunger from people that have watched the technology industry that we all enjoy and are a part of and are challenged by as it, layer on top of layer on top of new layer on top of whole new stack on top of all these extra building blocks that we all need to try and find some pathway to cool and confident and
predictable.
This is organized and going to make some sense, and I can make a bet on it, and the bet's going to pay off, and I'm just not going to get hung out to dry.
Yeah. What was interesting is just sort of the way they categorize work, and they had systems to track work, but nobody was using the systems.
Mm-hmm.
very typical.
Yeah.
And so this concept of how technical debt can get in the way of this need to enable transformation, this need for entire businesses within industries for themselves to transform, that was eye-opening as well. And you've seen it very intimately in all of the engagements between your time at AWS and your time at Google Cloud.
Sure.
So is it so again, for me it's like, I don't have that level of field experience from the CEO standpoint, and we're starting to see that now as people are talking about wanting to go to cloud, and they talk about cloud, but what they're really talking about is ideally a long-term solution to this predicament.
Right. I forget which article that I was reading. Oh, I know where it's from. It's from the Bandcamp guys who say their book is Work Doesn't Have to Be Crazy. And the opening section is basically, there's a lot of different approaches for prioritizing and streamlining your work and making sure that you're efficient. I'll give you the best one. Do less. Have less to do. Like, don't do as many things. And you look at there's a great GIF that was going around a couple days ago that's, it says like, this is what modern web development looks like. And it's a guy on a whitewater river raft setup, but it's 9 river rafts stacked on top of each other. Yeah. And he's like trying to figure out how to balance on top of this thing. And it's clear like at any minute the ropes are going to go and he's just going to make out with a boulder. And that's, that's where most businesses are. They are responsible for such a huge variety of technologies. The notion of a full stack developer today to be able to go from Rust to Rust, right? One being spinning around on platters, the other being a language you can use that just got, the delta there is so massive that awesome. Now you're at, 6 people who have to coordinate and communicate about the vagaries of the details between their different layers, all of which have their own challenges, their own problems. Like, boy, it's just too big. So I think a lot of people look at that. I saw it first in the security models on AWS, where it's like, this part is our job to secure. And this part up here, that's your job to secure. And all I ever saw any customer go, wait a minute, I don't have to do any of that stuff below there. You're like, yep, you don't have to do any of that stuff. Holy moly, that's like a whole set of work that, that takes a huge number of hours right now. It's totally unpredictable. It's complex. It exposes us to all this risk. So I think cloud is this big offer to have to do less to get done what you got to do. Yeah. And, there's a bunch of other ways to try and go faster, but having less to do sounds like a pretty good start.
What I like about our conversations with clients, it's really this sort of fork in the road, red pill, blue pill moment, right? It forces the conversation around business priorities. Mm-hmm. It challenges them to undertake transformation, and it's calling them. It's not something they can ignore, for much longer. And at least they're at a point now versus maybe a decade ago where they all know they have to do it. But what is it? What's the best process for getting started? Because I think that's where decision makers get hung up, because they see this as this big risky thing. Are they prepared to put their careers on the line as CIOs, CEOs, etc.? But also below that, people executing. How do they get started, and what's the best support and engagement models you've seen where the model can be proven in a lower risk contained fashion and maybe, hopefully, create a foundation for everything else they need to do. But, they need to prove something up relatively quickly first to gain the confidence in the approach and in cloud and their partner and everything else.
Yeah, I'll say a couple things. First, transformation as a label and as a concept for the way businesses work. I mean, your CEO, I'll give an example of another CEO. I worked for a long time together with the folks at WPP, which is the world's largest media conglomerate. What does WPP stand for? It stands for Wire and Paper Products. It's a company in the UK that made mostly shopping carts and electric tea kettles. And they had a young economist and analyst who made a proposal as a part of his thesis that there was a big opportunity for consolidation and improvements in efficiency in the marketing ecosystem, and he thought it would make sense to start buying marketing companies. This is not a normal, it's not a faster shopping cart or a better electric tea kettle. It's a giant leap of faith for a business doing a very different market. And now that business is gigantic and super, super successful. That analyst, Martin Sorrell, was knighted, right? So I don't think if I go to most CEOs or even technology leaders, that any of them, particularly have a hard filter that says, I don't want some new innovative idea. I don't want to, make my taxi company into a car company, my car company into a delivery company, my delivery company into a food company, right? Like, I think all of us recognize the capabilities of platforms and the urge to be able to be open-minded as to the possibilities in the space. It's back to the end of the question you asked, like, okay, but awesome, how do I do that, right? How do I get to a place where innovation is backed by capability, that we're actually able to take those ideas and convert them into something that works? And the problem is, for almost all of the opportunities that we're talking about, the time frames in which the opportunity is obvious and clear and there's a real market need, that time window is shrinking every year. It gets smaller and smaller and smaller. You talk to the fashion people and they're talking about what is the clothing item of the week at this point, right? Real-time fashion means you're producing new articles almost daily at this point. And so if you have this conflict between big opportunities exist, there's nobody that looks around at the world and says it's not changing faster than it ever has before. That volatility is an opportunity for everybody. But if I can't take actions quickly enough to be able to capture that opportunity, someone else is the one that grabs it. So, what I heard all the time is, and that I like, is that speed is beating size every time, over and over again. That the quickest to market, the quickest to react, the quickest to anticipate, the folks who have the clearest concept of where to take that next action are the ones that'll be competitive in the market.
The big don't eat the small, the fast eat the slow.
That's right.
And it's easier than ever today to enter a new business, to start a new business, to launch a product, to launch a service, with or without funding, by the way. It's sort of like there's this very healthy set of, seed, private equity, VC. There's just so much money on the sidelines. Anybody with a great idea can essentially raise money today. But
that's right.
But I know because, my wife is bootstrapping a new fashion line. Like, it's not that hard. Like, relative to 20 years ago, 10 years ago. It's just, or anything. Like, you can manufacture a new thing, like, and enter the router market. Right. Like anything.
Well, and that goes back to the, what I was saying before, right? It is easier because there is now less to do. Right? Yes. Like, I want legal documentation. Awesome. There are open source frameworks for all that. Here's all the docs that you're likely going to need. I need my website to work. Awesome. Here's totally managed services that handle that. I'm going to need business cards. Awesome. I just sort of, click this button and they show up. Like, I want to have a new logo. Awesome. Fiverr. You get one from 20 different people in 6 minutes, right? Like, the reduction in the undifferentiated heavy lifting, the routine from these kinds of experimentative processes means that you get to the path of value faster.
So the incumbents are no longer impenetrable.
Totally.
Their moat, there's no moat. I mean, maybe there is one, but it's not very. The alligators, there's no alligators in the moat anymore.
Sure.
And so the Fortune 500, the Fortune 2000, however you define it, they're not immune to the competitive elements that exist today, not only within each other, but from the next, you call it, the next Uber, the next Shopify, whatever, right?
Yep.
So, but a lot of our clients are in that category of established, industry leaders. So how do we help them not be a statistic?
There's three things. First, cool idea from it's kind of a history/future book that talks about the advantages of backwardness, right? So the kind of canonical example here is telecommunications in mainland China, where you go, if we want to run twisted pair copper networking to every person alive in China over the physical distances involved, we likely run the Earth's crust out of copper. Well, okay, that's a problem. And in order to be able to kind of take advantage, you're going to have to figure out some other way around that problem. China's backwards. Nobody has telephones. Oh man, this isn't working. All of a sudden they figure out cellular telecommunications and now everybody can have one of those. They leapfrog forward across a whole industry of trillions of dollars of physical investment on the ground in the rest of the populated world that's now kind of superfluous, right? Like there just aren't that many people that have the rotary phone on their desk anymore. That baby's gone. I don't need 50 volts transmitted over it to pull the ringer button. That's all digital. So I think a lot of businesses that missed the boat on infrastructure as a service didn't say, dive in with AWS or with VMware even, right? Like I see a lot of places that are bare metal and appliances and, they've been able to sort of eke the last legs out of those technologies. Awesome. Go straight to containers. Leap over that whole learning curve, that whole set of technologies. You get to move up 2 or 3 ladder steps in one go and not feel like you're missing too much. Because I don't know anybody that's on infrastructure as a service now that's not going, well, okay, I'm going to start working on this container thing too, right? Like everybody's going the same direction. You're trying to figure out how to let somebody else do as much of the work as you can. So that's one bit. Another bit that's important is to not lose track of the positive differentiation that you do actually have, which is in most cases a big stable of existing customers.
That's right.
Right? Like every startup that I talk to, it's like issues 0 through 10 are, okay, how do I get enough customers? Right? Like you already have them. And potentially like along with that a brand and a market presence and shelf space and all of the rest of these strategic advantages. And, bluntly, because the technology gets easier every day, if the only gap between you and the other competitors is the tech stuff, like, okay, fix the tech stuff, right? Like, it's just not that bad. Third bit that's super important is context. So a whole bunch of the companies that are getting started and are trying to disrupt these individual areas, they don't have nearly as much data about what has happened in the sequence of their users and customers. They don't know what the cycles year over year and period over period are for the movement of that business, and they can get caught unaware by those transitions. Your better information means that you're going to build better models, you'll make better predictions, you'll be able to take smarter actions if you can put that data into gear. And there's plenty of places that just left their data in neutral, which is not so awesome, and presents a lot of opportunity. But that's a clear place where they have some big advantages.
So brass tacks. I'm in some industry, manufacturing, let's say, and I have 10,000 employees and have, things that I make and build, and I'm not growing as fast and I need to make it easier for my teams to develop and release new products to market, and need to understand the buying habits of my direct customers and also what my distributors need to buy more from me. And I have a bunch of systems. I have some mainframe stuff. I have some bare metal. I've virtualized some things. I have a pretty good in-house dev team, decent ops. Like, where do I get started?
Sure. There's kind of three basic entry points. In terms of outputs, like what are the kinds of changes that businesses make to be able to capitalize on these opportunities. An easy example, like take the folks, I think it's Lockheed, although it may be one of the other aerospace manufacturers, who built a totally specialized single customer. NASA was the only folks that were going to buy it. Extraordinarily low friction bearing that was used on a couple of different satellites, right? No other market for this thing. Whole pile of R&D gets put into it. Not really sure what you want to do. Has anybody seen a fidget spinner, right? Which are this bearing. Yeah. That's the only reason those things are fun. Being able to look at adjacent markets, alternative markets, doing marketing research, right? Where are the buyers for the product that you have a differentiated ability to build? That market research, I think, is very, very powerful. There are a bunch of third-party services that can do it, but in a lot of cases, businesses in their product management and their marketing departments, they don't have enough access to just the basic information that's available now across so many different social and online channels. Being able to pull all that data together with, likely into something like BigQuery or, even combining it into online web interfaces as a big way to get a better handle on what's actually happening, like to be able to be connected to those market opportunities. In delivery of that kind of stuff, efficiency in production is another whole huge opportunity. A bunch of that's around, improved maintenance on, in industrial features and better analysis of the life cycle of componentry. So, there are really simple brand new tools, a thing from Google Cloud called AutoML tables that lets you say, like, you already have a spreadsheet where you keep all the stuff about how long it's been since you updated this part's oil change or that part's refinishing or whatever it is. Maybe just a tip, cram all that table data into an ML model for tables and see if you get a better prediction than your little R squared line, right? Like, just take it for a spin. There's a recent result in a Kaggle competition. That's an online group that does machine learning model accuracy competitions. They show kind of a top 10 list, and number 2 in the list isn't a person, it's just AutoML.
Yes.
Right? You're like, hold on a minute. So there's this rather incredible chunk of magic that Google has crammed out there and they're letting everybody have access to it. I don't know. It's like they've handed over superpowers or something.
Yep.
So third
democratizing those things, by the way, is so important.
Huge. And
so necessary.
And like, okay, it's in a table, right? You get to the data that you've been using, you've crammed it into a spreadsheet, you do this little prediction, you show that to your boss, he says, well, okay, I guess we buy more of these. That's what that says, I guess that's what we do. But it's in a spreadsheet, which is a Google Doc. Like, I can share that to everybody else on the team. They can all look at how I did it and go, oh, well, that doesn't seem all that hard. Let me just change the couple of labels at the top and put my data in there and see if it works. Oh, wow, it does work, right? Like, this is the kind of stuff where you don't do 2-week training classes or you don't need like a, giant long form certification for this stuff, right? It is in fact easy enough to use to just cut people loose with it and see what they do.
It's almost viral.
Yeah. And that, especially in a business where, if you're managing in any kind of reasonable way, what you're indexing on is people's ability to drive performance, to drive change as a result of that. And, anything that's that easy to adopt is worth its weight in something better than gold. So And I was going through the list. The third bit, that I think is an important place to start is thinking through all of the different interfaces that you have to customers today. We were talking about the market first, and then maybe, how production or how you can measure. But your interface to customers, if you look at, if there's anything you can pull out of cloud technology, every one of the technology providers in public cloud have used those tools to improve the accuracy and the fidelity of their relationship with customers, and to make it so that that's something that's, on the one side, delightful for customers to use. Nobody likes it when the thing has a spinny wheel in front of it. Everybody's frustrated when you get a 404 this morning. There's all sorts of problems associated with the downsides of a bad user interface or bad automation at that tier. But the upside, the other direction, being able to observe your users in practice. What are they actually using your product for? At my startup, I was sure that I had built a piece of software that people liked. They bought it. They paid us $20,000 a month for this website. I was like, woo, we're making money. And then we're looking at the logs on the website, and no one actually uses it. I think there's almost no logins. I'm like, why is anybody paying for this product? And my tech support, quote unquote, phones are ringing off the hook. I'm like, I would assume that means that they're trying to use it and having trouble or something. I talked to all the tech support people. No. They're just having conversations about what social media is. Oh, I'm running a consultancy that has an extraordinarily unusual payment model. Fair enough, right? So, if you don't really see what's happening in your product, and that can be, if you're a manufacturer of physical goods, this part of your product is all the way out at how it gets sold or how it gets marketed or how your customers ask questions about it. If you're a digital services is way into the individual buttons that people click. But that fidelity of user information, I think is going to be a big difference between successful and unsuccessful companies going forward.
So I'm a huge advocate. I believe in excelling in all the experiences. Most passionate, of course, about customer experiences.
Sure.
And a lot of that is sort of apps, customers, consumers, especially millennials, but really everyone. They want to be able to interface with whoever they're getting services or products from through some sort of an app or a beautiful website or whatever. And so, assuming that, and we'll talk about talent in a minute, but you're able to build these things and you want to go to market with them. And one of the things that the Phoenix Project surfaced was the difficulty of that in a traditional IT ops model. So even if you have these great ideas and you have wonderful marketing and go to market and you have a great customer base and you want to release your version of Phoenix, what can cloud do internally within these organizations, IT organizations, to make that process smooth, predictable, error-free, make releases faster? Like what's the internal engineering that needs to take place for that to be enabled?
So one of the core things, right? Like nobody wants egg on their face. Everybody hates it when this most recent change that you've made brings the system down or blows a bunch of error messages for customers or exposes, the job of IT at its most fundamental, when you really get in and talk to the CIO, they're about risk mitigation, right? They're about prevention of leak and breakdown and problems and error. And that viewpoint is valid, and it's important that the technologies that we build hew to preserving value as a first principle, not just, I always get a little cringy when I hear move fast and break things, right? So the flip side of that is if you talk to those folks about, what are the best practices? How do they avoid risk? What is the method that you use to do that? It's about explicit, specific mitigations. This is a risk I'm concerned about. I need a mitigation for that risk. Take the easiest one, like my software is running on one computer. I'm going to need two of them. That's going to be better, right? And there's going to be a thing in front of them that balances traffic between the two. Sheesh, I should have two of those too, right? Getting to high availability is maybe an obvious place where these practices bear out, but they have the same concepts bear fruit in A/B testing in designs or any of the other kinds of places where you have that kind of optionality. For most businesses, building things physically and building them manually and building them in a way that it's impossible for them to layer on top of prior implementations, every one of those steps has to be done by hand, and so they take months. And so in that case, it's so expensive to build not just A, but A and B, so you can measure between the two of them. You have to really be certain that this is a good experiment to take on. So then you do all this analysis to make sure you're not wasting a bunch of money. Oh, lordy, the analysis costs almost as much as just building it in the first place.
2 years later.
Both of those things are too expensive and too time-consuming, and forget it, you haven't shipped anything, right? So if instead, and this is the CIO or my job, the CTO, however you want to think about it, is focused just on reducing the cycle time of each of those steps, right? How do I make it cheaper to produce A and B? How do I make sure that a bunch of this stuff happens by default? How do I make it so that when we build a piece, I can reuse that piece in a way that's reliable so that I can compose solutions instead of having to craft them every time? If you want to see the clearest examples of that, it's pretty easy to look at the products in cloud and say, wow, they are really structured in this way, right? If you go into Google Cloud and you ask a brand new product manager today, how do you build your next Google Cloud product? They're not buying Rust. It turns out they don't have to kick shovels in a data center any place. None of them install a compiler. Turns out that there's no networking configs. They don't even install virtual machines. None of that stuff. They stand on top of GKE, and here's the primitives that I use to orchestrate the deployment of my software. They can inherit all of the operational experience, all of the utilization management from every other Google Cloud project. It's entirely composable to them, and they just build the part that's unique that they need. So if you can prioritize in the work that you do, the effort constantly to reduce the repetitive and the manual and the just unstructured in what you do, that necessarily reduces that cycle time, and that's how you get into a really innovative.
Also, that's where mistakes happen.
Sure.
Like manual, repetitive.
Oh yeah.
Human error.
The most recent outage on the Google Cloud side, right? Nobody's immune to this stuff. Everybody has downtime. You look right in the middle of it. It's a misconfigured change in one of the networking steps. And you've got all sorts of protections in place against it, but it's 3 different misconfigurations over some chunk of time having an unexpected interaction. That kind of, when you look at those RCAs of the way those systems fail, what's so critical to observe, and I think as a CIO, you'd really take away, like, that's very different than my business, is not that somebody poked the wrong button and then all of a sudden things went kerplooey. It's that I had systematic analysis in place and remediation plans in place and failovers in place, so we were back in service in minutes, not months of forensic debugging of all the mayhem that sits inside of most of these companies.
So on the theme of getting started, for organizations, those who have invested in cloud already have probably picked more than one. They also have a hodgepodge of internal systems, some of them bare metal, some of them virtualized, some of them containerized. That's why everybody's so excited about Google's announcement around Anthos and the Anthos strategy. I know we're very bullish on it. Can't wait till Chicago. Yeah. It's only like 3 weeks away now, I think.
Hooah.
Where we get to do a little show and tell of that. But why is Anthos so important to the enterprise? And why do we feel like, as an ecosystem, why are we so excited about that enabling the kind of things we're talking about on this podcast?
Sure. You've got cloud is still just somebody else's computer, right? And Google may have 1/5 of the x86 processors that get manufactured on a yearly basis, but by Lord, it's not enough. And they're not in enough places, and they're not in enough legal contexts, and they're not in enough environments to meet all of the needs for all of computing everywhere. Give them a decade, right? It's one of those groovy things where there's only 192 or 193 countries. Like, they got 20 in the last 2 or 3 years. They'll catch up. But in the meantime, there's all of this infrastructure all over the world, right? It's sitting pile of something like $3 or $4 trillion of gear that's still viable, that's in the middle of being depreciated, all the different data centers and facilities around the world. So if you already have gear that's in a place that's not just, heinously inefficient or, already like immensely beyond end of life or unmaintainable, if you have gear that's still useful, you're back looking at this problem of how do I reduce the number of steps and the number of components that I'm responsible for managing? And worse, if I'm going to manage some component, can I make it so I don't have to manage 3 different ones that do the same thing?
Yes.
Right? So you've got a bunch of places that they've got in AWS, they run on Elastic Beanstalk, and they have a whole build pipeline for that, and they figured that all out. And on-prem, they've got OpenShift or some other framework library, or they're running inside of VMware, or they're bolted onto DCOS and Mesos, and then in Google they've been experimenting with GKE or other pieces, and like the complexity there is now massive, and the risk associated with the lack of skills. Now you got to have 3 times as many experts to be able to figure all this different stuff out. The debugging pathways are all totally different. So your forensics are going to, you need run books that are alternative for each, right? It's just bottomless. So as a decision maker in one of these businesses, if I can say, wait a minute, there's one stack and it runs the same on all of them, and all those bits are open. I'm never going to get locked out of it. I don't have, there's no component there that I don't have direct access to the actual source code that's being run, and it will make it so that I go to one pane of glass and I can see all of them. Like, forget it. There's a huge value prop on the other end of that. And it, I think at first blush and in the first motions of it, will be the kind of thing that is immensely appealing to the biggest technology organizations, the folks that are running hundreds of developers, thousands of developers, where the costs associated with that multiplexing are huge. And you go, I will pay real dollars if I can figure out how to get out from underneath having to manage this heterogeneous substrate. But over time, I think it's going to become really, really obvious that layer is now dominant, right? Kubernetes is a runaway freight train, and I don't think there's anybody that thinks that that's not on a path to be as ubiquitous as Linux, as ubiquitous as C, as ubiquitous as x86. So, okay, if this is the next layer, we're all going to say, provides value, continuous improvements are happening across dozens of different players and the major contributors in the ecosystem, healthy production, high scale implementations. I mean, running the biggest game in the history of games at Pokemon, running all manner of payment stuff on the PayPal site, like people all over the place implementing this across every different vertical. Okay, how do I get to a place where I'm just able to implement the industry standard at the lowest risk? And there is a reason that Kelsey wrote the paper that's called Kubernetes the Hard Way. It's not like the thing installs itself, right? It has a bunch of dependencies. It's a complex little monster. And being able to go to, Google folks and SADA folks and say, can I please have me one? And we poke the button and the thing exists and it's compliant and it's going to, for certain that the applications that run in one are going to run in the other. And that's just, that value prop is big.
Seems like panacea.
Well, and nothing's perfect, right? Like, this is early days. Can you run Kubernetes in the middle of your mainframe? No, you can't. You can run COBOL in a container. So, okay, maybe I can run my mainframe in Kubernetes. Right. But, I think it's easy to look at these kinds of things as simple, oh, awesome, now we'll have Kubernetes, and that will replace all my use of compute. In reality, the majority of cloud consumption has been in addition to existing physical infrastructure.
Right.
It's not a replacement. migration of the legacy is slow and long and battle hard, but as businesses try to innovate, they look at appending new technologies on top, right? Like, we can all make fun of the finance industry and say, this thing where you had like the old slow once a day reconciliation of accounts, and then you put this layer on top that let you do transactions in the middle of the day, that's a crazy architecture. You should just change the bottom one and make it so it's stable. Yeah, it's crazy, but it did enable the entirety of mobile finance and every one of the innovations in banking in the last 15 years. Yeah. So like, you know, I don't think you can get too pissed off at them for that. So
my beautiful Wells Fargo app, it's so beautiful, but I know deep down inside, far beneath, is some mainframe.
There's some nasty chunk of AS400 that runs once a night that takes 6 hours to run, and by gum, it gets it right every single time. So I don't think that this is about some holistic, systematic digestion of corporate IT and its conversion into a mystical cloud native thing. It's about a new capability that arrives at a lower complexity and a lower price point and a lower aggregate risk that lets them start to take some experiments more rapidly.
Yeah,
and as it becomes more capable and starts to displace existing systems and use cases, you know, all marvelous, spectacular. It sounds great.
Look, I think in a sort of containerized Kubernetes world, I think it does enable a faster migration to cloud, certainly, a clearer path, but also in your analogy and Vince Cerf's analogy around intercloud, like it also starts making sense of this multi-cloud world.
Yep.
Right? Yep. Which I think is challenging for all organizations. I mean, many we talk to, it just depends on how they operate. It's like they give the business whatever they want. They want this cloud, they can have that too, and you know, and I think just managing that from an ops standpoint, Anthos brings in all this additional value of how to do that, because it is complicated.
Yeah, I think there are incredible things being built at each of the cloud providers because of the substrate of container as a service, infrastructure as a service, database as a service, these basic building blocks that every application needs to consume. And if you look at most businesses, they're trying to weigh and balance the degree to which they plug into those higher level managed services or whether they run their own. I mean, I remember super early on, it was kind of a miraculous thing that you would build an application out of these, you know, it's not just the database and the front end. Like, you might want, you know, a cache in there in the middle, and, you know, there's actually some of your stuff that doesn't need transactionality, and, you know, there's actually some of this stuff you don't even need durability for. You're just trying to keep track of it for a couple of seconds. So the explosion of different structural components made it so that overall cost went down, but complexity went up. And then you're like, oh, it's going to be marvelous. We'll just do all these in virtual machines, so that you lay all of them out in VMs, and, you know, the onset of a standardized machine image. I mean, I remember the first time downloading a VMDK for a piece of software, I was like, oh, they have bundled this up in a way that is very, very portable and very powerful. And then you go into the container marketplaces now, and you can boot these things in 50 milliseconds. You're like, that's dramatically more portable, dramatically more powerful. Okay. And, going from being able to describe what you want to deploy, but then still cut loose an engineering team to spend months deploying it, to now it's obvious that, you know, it's kind of almost a waste of time to explain the order of the architecture components in English. You should just probably spit that stuff out in Deployment Manager or Terraform or something, because nobody has time for any of the analysis of the building. I just want to see the whole application work as a structured system, and that transition, moving through to a place where I can experiment with multiple whole stacks for serving my application at the push of a button, automatically deployed in a compliant standard way, making it so that it's something that other experts have weighed in and said, yeah, that's a reasonable approach to this stuff. That's a giant push down of value into the actual rank and file workers who are struggling with this stuff every day. I don't know any customer that says, hey, can you give me like ambiguous and wishy-washy guidance?
Right.
just sort of give me a bunch of options, but don't tell me which one I should pick or which dimensions I should use to figure it out. Like,
they're like, be prescriptive. Tell me what to do.
Yeah, please just make there be a button that does this, right? And it's hard because, on the one side we really empathize with the developer who says that down in the weeds, but I get exactly the same sentence from the CIO. Where's the innovation button at? I want that button, man. So it's important to grok which things have been templatized already and which ones have not.
So speaking of actually landing this at customers to their benefit, not only initially but also long term, and at SADA I think we're very sort of enablement focused in how we deliver professional services. We don't want you to outsource your IT to us or outsource all of your DevOps to us. That's not necessarily a business we want to be in, but we think that's actually risky long term for these customers who kind of outsource, quote unquote, outsource innovation or outsource core capabilities that should be a competitive advantage. Like, let us come in and enable you, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And I think Project Phoenix has sort of a view on talent and who you need and how to manage and put people in the right functions. Also avoid the one person that knows everything and the only person that knows everything. So from a talent standpoint, how do you think in this era with cloud and public cloud and all these the rapid innovation curve that we're on, what is the talent strategy for our customers? And then obviously that correlates kind of to our own strategy as we're hiring teams and building certain capabilities. So what guidance and advice would you have for the market in terms of how they think about talent?
It's the perennial joke, but it's the most important one to tell. I was just looking this morning and a buddy was commenting, with in full quotes, like this job requisition that he had seen that said, I need somebody with 8 years of experience in serverless cloud tech. I'm fairly certain that Lambda came out 4.5 years ago, so that's totally impossible, right? Even if you want to chalk it up, the joint was ahead of that, or however you want to sort of lay into who were the first movers in functions, that's not real. So there, and I think it belies the need that companies have to de-risk their investments, both in technology and in people. So, if the only path to validating someone's expertise with a given technology is their prior experience with that technology, you're going to have some trouble. I went to a liberal arts college. I'm a liberal arts kind of a person. So I think the most important skill for any technologist especially, but certainly anybody in business, is the ability to learn, because it's not like the world isn't changing faster than we have any ability to keep track with. And so anything that's meaningful and disruptive inside of these businesses to be able to help them innovate is going to be brand new. And that's going to require people not who will follow the instruction manual, but who will write the instruction manual as they go. And that's a very different kind of a person, right? It's, when you're thinking through the right skills, we ask all the time in interviews, about area of technology that you know most about, or, help me, teach me a thing I don't know. And we're really hoping to get to a place where, where we're at the boundary of what your knowledge is. And at that point, I really want to know how you would learn more. What are the approaches? Where would you go? Who would teach you that stuff? How would you experiment? How's your approach to that? Those skills are the ones that are going to differentiate the people that are going to be, receptive to the next innovative building block that allows them to push their businesses forward.
I think it's a misconception some of our clients have, and certainly the members of the IT organization and our clients have, oh my God, they're going to bring in all new people. Cloud, I'm going to lose my job because of cloud.
It's so ridiculous, right? You walk into one of these guys. It's like, hey, I have an idea. Let's bring in somebody that doesn't know anything about your business context, has no idea about any of the technology components that you use, has no background in how they've been used in any of the products that you use.
Great at Kate's.
Right. But they're just wailing at Kate's, right? So that, no business, it's pretty sweeping statement, but I'll stick it out there. I would say like the largest impediment to most companies, full stop, is their access to technical talent. Like, can they bring technologists to bear to reduce problems to something that's automatic, reduce a problem to a solved state? And if that technical talent is the hardest thing for you to get and one of the most precious assets that you have, certainly data falls into that, certainly brand that falls into that, and other ingredients. But if that technical talent is so critical, the idea that any single human that's any good at any of this stuff is even remotely disposable is nuts.
That's right.
Nuts.
That's right.
And the companies that I've seen be successful, like I did a big project, we worked together with the folks at Airbus. Airbus had 180 full-time people working for a decade, hand tabulating the images that came off of the cameras that are on the bottom of their planes. Is this one snow or is this one clouds? Well, pretty sure that's snow. Pretty sure that one's clouds. 180 people for a decade, right? Like that sounds to me like job security. And those people, somebody got really good at it, right? I'm sure they had top 10 performers. Like somebody was the number one cloud versus snow categorizer in the world. And I'm sure if they look at their paycheck on a monthly basis, they're going, if they figure out a robot how to do this, I'm screwed.
Right.
Well, we built a robot that figured out how to do it. Yep. We used AutoML and Vision API to be able to automatically categorize at higher accuracy the difference between
computers can already see better than people.
Oh yeah,
that's just a fact.
That's just a given deal, right? Like, and the rate of that is happening faster and faster across a broader and broader set of domains. And you would imagine that Airbus would go, oh, glorious, we no longer need these people, marvelous, and off they go. They are not stupid. Yes. Absolutely not. They have a trained team that is immensely high accuracy at evaluating these categories of value. And so they started to look at all the other places in the Airbus data set where they didn't have the sample data labeled in the way that they would need to be able to build the models that would let them innovate.
Someone's got to train the models.
Someone's got to train the model. And, someone's got to tune the model after that, and somebody's got to combine the models into combinatorial analytics. Somebody's got to be able to apply those to broader business spaces. As you up-level your tech, you have the opportunity to up-level your people. And if you only do one and not the other, you are screwing up. Yeah. Right? Like in the same situation, imagine what a total waste it is to send a bunch of engineers to get trained up on whatever, serverless or write a bunch of hot analytics in R or whatever it is, and then send them home to work on the mainframe. Yeah. And never give them access to the stuff you taught. Yeah. Like, that's just crazy. What an obvious waste. It's the same thing to waste the resource of those technologies.
I'm so impressed with people's ability, if they have the right mindset and philosophy, just learn new things.
That's right.
Like one of our engineers got, I think the cloud architect certification. So now they're an architect in all three clouds. Like, Jesus, Chris, like, way to throw the gauntlet down. But but I think that the key is, I think it's technical leadership, but it's also business leadership that has to value that and recognize that, and create a culture where there's continuous progress and learning, and then of course practical applications of what people have learned, and have these programs to develop talent at different levels. And then create an environment that actually new engineers want to come and work at from the outside as well, because you have an engineering culture.
Well, if you think the only part of businesses that are changing is the connection to their customers and how they do internally, like as if the employees aren't getting more sophisticated too.
Definitely.
Right? Like you have more information today about comp bands between different companies, about the level of training that they offer, how much they invest in their people, what are the benefits packages. People are A/B testing that data too. Yep. And if you can't show that your business is one that invests in its technologists, invests in innovation, shows a path for growth for people, I'm sorry, who wants to work at a spot that's stagnant, right? It's just not going to fly.
For me, like I said, I'm passionate about experiences. Employee experience, people experience is actually comes ahead of customer experience.
That's right.
Because unless you have a fantastic people experience at your company, you cannot provide an exceptional customer experience. It just doesn't translate. It's impossible to do that. So that's key. And of course, I think getting some of this adopted in your otherwise maybe, older environment in which your serverless trained engineers come and actually have nothing to work on. Mm-hmm. I think getting started with some aspects of cloud, injecting that in the appropriate fashion, I think is a great starting point for internally developing that culture, regardless of how much you'll end up doing on your own versus having a partner do it. I think getting started is really important and something that people get excited about. Engineers get genuinely excited about.
Yeah, no, I mean it's the same thing as I think over the last chunk of time it was pretty obvious if you wanted to hire young, creative, aggressive, people that are interested in collaboration, people that are excited about, working quickly and working in teams, they're going to want G Suite. They're going to want a collaboration suite that reflects that, right? I'm going to tell you, if you call up and put up your job descriptions about the technologies that you're using and there isn't anything that's modern in there, like, I don't know who you're trying to say, and it's one thing for you to say, I need you to have experience in this old tech because we're in the middle of change and this is an important piece of context for us. That's awesome. And I think what that does is makes your job description reflect the reality of the market where you have people with experience over the last decade of tech, 2 decades of tech, and to not value them for their expertise there, I think is a loss on your part. But if you don't show in the pathways that you're putting in front of potential employees and your current employees, the trajectory of growth that you're taking on as a business and how you intend to work with them to pull their career along so that they can pull your business along, is short-sighted.
Miles, we have so much to do. So much ahead of us.
I know. I got to keep typing.
I feel an obligation to the market. And to the people. That work there to help set them up for success so that the businesses continue to grow, the economy grows. I'm an optimist. I think you have to be to run a business.
That's true.
Or to be any leader in a business, you kind of have to be an eternal optimist. And it's just after 10 years, to your point earlier in another segment that we did, after 10 years. It's like we're 7% of the way through.
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
It's just so much to do.
So much.
But I'm excited. Thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it. First of many. Any words of wisdom? Final parting words?
I will completely plagiarize from Liz. She and it kind of reflects this last subject we were talking about. She said that either you're making your customers happy or your people happy. And if it's not those two things, and you're wasting your time, right? So I'm excited about being able to plug into both our customers and our employees and think through how we make them very, very happy.
I love that. Great way to end it. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you for listening to Cloud and Clear. Check the show notes for links to this week's topics. And don't forget to connect with us on Twitter @CloudandClear and our website, sada.com. Be sure to rate and review the show on your favorite podcast app.